I think I'm proof positive that like networking works, talking to people works, going to events works. Find out what your local events are, go to them, sign up, go.
Hello and welcome back to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode I speak to Joshua Garrity, who works as a head game scout for Secret Mode.
So let's go back to the beginning, as it were. Did you go to university?
I did. I have a bit of a weird journey to where I am now. I mean, peek behind the curtain for everyone. Emily and I know each other from a long time ago, so this is not going to come as a surprise to her. But originally, I wasn't pursuing a role in the games industry. I was more interested in performance, acting, that kind of thing. I ended up doing a foundation degree in drama that just didn't go anywhere. And then the real change of fortunes came when I decided, wait a minute, I really like games. Why don't I pursue something in this trajectory? So I took a course at London South Bank University called Games. It was a BA in Games Cultures. And the degree itself, so I got 2-1, yay, great, whatever. But the degree itself was not necessarily the thing that propelled me forward. It was the connections I made and the networking I did as part of that degree, being able to get access to free BAFTA events and things like that, meeting people in the industry, getting to know people, and quickly realizing that I don't know, my tone, my tenor kind of fit with the culture of that industry. And I don't mean to badmouth the theatre industry, but there's a lot of you'll know this, Emily. There's a lot of ego, there's a lot of like snobbery, and I just found that the games industry it has its faults, but it was absent of that particular type of personality. So I found it more welcoming because of it.
So it was primarily through networking that you managed to land all of your different jobs. So how did you first enter the industry specifically?
So again, it was a who I knew rather than what I knew situation. I was really good friends with somebody. Their name's Darren. They were working at Sold Out at the time as a product marketing manager. They were leaving because they were having a kid at the time, and the role was very demanding in terms of time, and they wanted to focus on family, that kind of thing. But they said, okay, my role is going up. They're going to want to fill that role. Josh, you should apply because you'd be good at this role. I applied, I got it. I can't say I got it due to the strength of the interview. I have to assume that Darren put in a good word for me, and that's how I ended up in the games industry. I was there. Sorry to kind of go off road for a second. I was at Sold Out for 6 years. I initially wasn't in a role that's kind of similar to what I'm doing now. Initially, I was more doing marketing, that kind of thing. I kind of showed what I had demonstrated was an aptitude for good communication with developers, with partners. And more, I was taking on responsibility for creating business, for talking with people external to the company, and inviting them into the fold.
Would you say that your background in drama gave you those communication skills, those confidence skills, those networking skills?
Absolutely. Like, well, because
massive waste of time.
yeah. No, nothing. The truth is, nothing's a waste of time, right? Like all these skills end up getting recycled and reused in different ways. The truth is, like, I am very much an introvert masquerading as an extrovert. Like, I've managed to fool everyone into thinking that I'm sociable and loud and quirky. But in reality, this is just it's not that it's fake. It's a version of myself that I'm like
Mhm.
presenting in order to be effective at my job. And that is absolutely the acting kind of coming in. It's like tap into a truth that is inside of you, present that to the world, because you staring at the floor, being nervous and hesitating over every word is not going to be useful or particularly charming
Mhm.
in this scenario. Um,
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, like it absolutely has ended up being useful in this role.
Mhm. So can we talk a bit more about what your entry level positions were? You talk about marketing and that sort of thing. What does that literally involve?
So in my role in market, because I was more on the product marketing manager side of things, which is more like basically like a project manager for the marketing campaign. So it's like building out the plan, and being a point of contact for the external partner. Um, so it's a lot of herding cats, honestly. Things like getting banner ads up on certain like platforms, organizing events like in the games industry we have events like Gamescom. They'll have like booth space for various publishers and individual titles. So you're responsible for that essentially. I was less responsible. So the other side of marketing is like the PR kind of press influencer, that kind of stuff. Was less involved with that. So I was more kind of talking with the client specifically rather than um, press or people like that.
Hmm. And you've worked your way up in a way to head video game scout.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? What do you do?
So I basically get to do the most fun part of because all of my roles have involved communication with developers right from the very start. But as head game scout or any game scouting role, essentially I just get to go out into the wilderness, um, talk with creators, talk with artists about their projects, what they're passionate about. Um, and get to pick my favorite to present to the rest of the team. Obviously, in a head game scout role, I get to talk more on the strategy side of things, like the wider guiding lights, like what kinds of games are we looking at? What kinds of developers do we want to build long-term relationships with? But in terms of the kind of hands in the mud side of things, it's very much kind of be the metaphor I always use is like a game scout is a truffle pig. Like it's I'm the truffle pig that the publisher puts out into the wilderness. I snuffle around for truffles, and then occasionally I find a really good truffle, and then the development director's hand will reach out in front of me and go, "Okay, thank you, Josh, for finding this truffle. Now the adults are going to take over, and we're gonna use this truffle properly. Promise us, I promise you, So yeah, that's essentially my role. Like I'm a mixture of dev relations, biz dev, and kind of grand strategy, kind of all mixed into one.
Nice. What truffle have you been most proud of?
Um, but both in terms of the quality of the game and just fiscally. Um, Core Keeper is probably the one I'm most proud of. It's still in early access. If people listening to this don't know what early access is, um, Steam has this kind of launched but not launched state that games can go into where you can buy it, but it's under the understanding that you're kind of feeding into the development process. You're kind of um, giving feedback to the game on the lead up to the official launch. So Core Keeper is still in early access and has sold over 2 million units already. It's going into 1.0, which is full launch, in August of this year and is expected to absolutely smash its targets. It's also a really good game. It's like a cross between Minecraft and Dungeon Keeper,
Oh,
um,
fun.
with 8-player co-op. Yeah, it's a really special game. So yeah, that one I'm most proud of. Shadows of Doubt, I do want to do a shout out for that title as well, which is like a detective um adventure game, but with like procedurally generated elements, so the story is different every time. Just in terms of the pure creativity and
Mhm.
ingenuity of that title, I love that as well.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. Um, so what do you love most about your job?
Um, Most of the time, I'm talking to people who are genuinely passionate about the medium, and that's what I love most. Is like going to events, meeting new people, meeting developers, and like we'll talk about the project, but then we get naturally we get into what inspired you, what drew you to this idea, and we start talking about, the games that are really special that, had an impact. So, yeah, it's a good thing that my favorite thing about this role is talking to people because that's what I spend most of my time doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be it.
Nice. So how do you continue learning and growing as a professional?
Um, the honest answer, so the way I don't really have like, and this will alarm some people listening. I don't really have like a plan, as it were, in terms of my progress. I'm very much an opportunistic type personality where I just say yes to things that land in my sphere of influence. Like the head game scout role here at Secret Mode was very much like people going, Josh, you should apply for this. Like go for it. Um, in terms of like roles, because I've kind of reached the logical endpoint of like scouting as a role, like the other than like working at bigger, more prestigious publishers, like this is kind of I'm at the top of my field. Um, the kind of role after this would be like VP of strategy or VP of publishing to take on, more of like a proper leadership role within a publisher. I have to say I'm not I don't feel like I want that just yet, at least the like next couple of years. I'm very, very happy in the position that I'm in. I feel well, I'm not going to go into details, but I feel well compensated for the role. I enjoy the work. So, I'm probably going to pursue a version of this for the time being until I
Mhm.
get bored, and at which point I will look upwards. So, yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Excellent. What is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Um, The best piece of advice I ever received was that doubt is an essential component of intelligence. So if you doubt yourself, it's proof that you actually know what you're doing. Um, Basically, like obviously, imposter syndrome is everywhere. Everyone experiences it. I think it's a good reminder that sometimes the people in your sphere who are very confident and overly so have no idea what they're doing. And it's almost like your moral duty to put yourself forward, even though you doubt yourself, even though you're like, I can't do this. The fact that you have that thought means that you are better suited for that role than someone who says, I'm absolutely certain I'm the best person for this role. So that is the best piece of advice I've been given.
Nice. Um, what industry trends are you keeping an eye on?
Um, so you may not be aware of this, but the games industry is going through a bit of a rough ride at the moment.
Really? I
So,
thought everyone was playing Baldur's Gate 3.
but well, if you work at Larian, thumbs up. You're happy. If you work at Nintendo, also thumbs up. You're very happy. Capcom as well, thumbs up. You're happy. Um, I think the industry is suffering a little bit from. We had a bump during COVID for obvious reasons. Everyone's indoors. Why don't I try out Animal Crossing? Like I need to play some games to pass the time. Um, and anyone who understands how behavioral trends work, of course, the moment lockdown stopped, like that was gonna adjust itself, right? People who weren't that into games will kind of go back to the things that they loved anyway, right?
Mhm.
Um, but industries being what they are, line must go up. Line must continue to go up. So there's been a bit of an adjustment period after the COVID bump disappeared, where everyone's trying to realize that this is, sales aren't going to be what they were during the
Mhm.
COVID period. Um, I think we're going through an interesting period where I think, and similar to the movie industry, actually, the movie industry, a lot of original non-IP stuff is breaking through in a way that it didn't previously. And I
Yeah,
think I think the games industry is in for a similar trend,
that's
where
cool.
um, I there are certain IPs that will always do well, but I think original ideas, original concepts at that kind of mid to indie budget are gonna have their time in the sun in a way that in previous years kind of bigger budget, the equivalents of like the MCU were kind of dominant. So that's what I would say is a trend to look for in the games industry going forward.
So fun. So, do you work a traditional sort of Monday to Friday, 9 to 5? How do you organize and manage your time?
It varies wildly. So some weeks it very much is like a 9 to 5, like clear out my inbox, have a few calls, but then I clock off. But then you have events where pretty much from the moment you wake up to go to bed, you're on the clock because even breakfast is work, even dinner is work. Um, so you kind of have to accept that that's a reality in this role. Thankfully, like, look, I'm not going to say no to having dinner while having a meeting. It's not exactly. I'm not like woe is me about it or anything, but it's certainly cushier than most roles. But like you are on it. You have to be on. You have to have a
Yeah.
professional head on that whole time, and that can be exhausting. There is also the reality of time zones that can take a toll as well. Thankfully, like I can be quite flexible with my schedule. So if I'm having a meeting with somebody in Australia, I can say to my line manager, look, I'm taking an extra hour at lunch because I woke up at God knows how early to talk to somebody in Melbourne. Um, and vice versa, the other side where I'm talking to somebody in the west coast of the US and I have to kind of stay an extra hour to make that
Mhm.
happen. So um I will say, like, in terms of work-life balance, like I do feel like I do have two hands firmly on the wheel on that front. Like I do have plenty of time to myself. But I have to be flexible, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It can't just be
Mm.
I only work within these hours and that's it. It has to be give and take a little bit.
Yeah, nice. Perfect. Are there any expectations you've had about your career that turned out to be different in reality?
Um, so I- in the film industry, everyone is largely everyone cares about film, loves film, is invested in film. In the music industry, largely everyone cares about film, is interested in film, loves no, loves music. You know what I mean? In
Yeah, yeah.
creative industry, most creative industries, most of the people you encounter, at least at like the kind of low, mid, even high level, are kind of invested in that medium. I do encounter a lot of people who are more on the tech industry side of the games
Oh.
industry, and I don't feel that same kind of passion for games as an art form and more as kind of pieces of software and um, their ability to make money, and I I I am a little bit disappointed by that. It depends where you are. Like I am more in the kind of indie to mid tier in terms of budget range, so
Mhm.
I am limited in terms of my contact with that kind of ethos and personality. But certainly with like legal firms, insurance firms, like I just had a chat with somebody at an event recently where they said, "Oh, I'm the tech guy in the office," so that they got me to come down to this games industry event. And I'm like, I know that we're very so I have sorry, I'm going on a tangent here, but I have a real like pet peeve like when it comes to the way culture and people outside the games industry frame the games industry. Um,
Mhm.
Even though we are heavily reliant on tech, we are very dependent on tech to create what we create. We are not a tech industry. In the same way that film uses a lot of CGI and a lot of special effects that require tech to create, film is not a tech industry. Games
Mhm.
are an arts industry. We are a creative industry. And I feel like uh, a good indicator of what a newspaper thinks of the games industry is where we're placed, what section we're in. Because in the Guardian, we're in the culture section, but
Right.
there are in other newspapers where it's this is the games and tech corner, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Oh.
Um, that's sorry to go off on a tangent there,
No,
but like
that's
that's
really
an entire that's a
interesting.
personality that you encounter in and around the games industry, and
Yeah.
and I think it's a real issue. I think it's something we need to fix, like the games industry needs to fix in terms of our
Yeah.
PR or whatever. Like we're not a tech industry, we're an arts industry, you know?
Absolutely.
So
I really honestly would have expected you to be surrounded by people that were playing Metroid under the covers at night time and then like working their way up through all the different games as they were getting older and could talk your ear off about, I don't know, Mario. You could tell I
yeah.
don't play any
I mean,
video
like,
games.
I don't mean to overstate it. Like, I am largely surrounded by exactly what you're describing. I guess, um,
It's a surprising thing
I,
to come
I
across.
I'm surprised that the message hasn't fully come through that
Mm.
this industry is closer to film and music in terms of
Yeah.
what we're creating than Google,
Yeah.
like or Facebook.
Yeah.
That's not what we are. And I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of I can't go into detail here, unfortunately, but I feel like a lot of the faceplant moments that the games industry has had has been due to that fundamental misunderstanding, has been due to that framing of us as a tech industry rather than an arts
Mm.
industry, and people having to learn that lesson the hard way. Um, but there we go. Anyway, sorry, moving
Yeah,
on.
no, it's interesting. Don't apologize. So in your roles, what technical skills have you relied on?
I'll be honest, a lot of my technical skills are knowing the path but not being able to walk the path. So I have to assess whether a developer so there will be questions like, do you have a C++ programmer? Um, your game is Unreal. Great. Like, how much of the game is in blueprints? Like, stuff like that, where like
Hmm.
I know enough to get me in trouble. But if you asked me to, if you ask me to make a game, like I could probably cobble something together, but I'm not a game designer. I'm not a
Mhm.
producer. I'm not that. Basically, I have enough technical knowledge, and I've done enough research in terms of, and I've watched enough talks where I can be annoying to somebody who who knows what they're doing. I know how to ask probing questions to get specific answers, but you would never put me in charge of a game design project. Like that.
Okay.
That's the level of technical expertise I have.
Nice. So your role very much more relies on the soft skills. You've already talked about networking, communication. What other soft skills do you rely on?
Um, so assertiveness is important because I'm in a lot of situations where I'm talking like I'm talking with leadership, right? I'm talking with I'm often in calls with executives, right? So I have to be able to confidently get my point across without annoying anyone. That's a key thing, like finding that balance. Being tactful. A lot of it is being tactful with word choice, and
Mhm.
excising words from your vocabulary that are unnecessary. Like sorry to be annoying, sorry to bother you, blah blah blah. These like passive things that people do to placate other people, but actually put themselves in a weaker position overall. Um,
Mm.
I think also, so this is kind of a soft skill, I guess, but and I'm using a super corporate term for it, but like radical candor is a thing. Basically, what radical candor is honesty is the best policy, right? It's
Nice.
it's it's basically forcing you um, to understand that sometimes people trusting you is more important than people liking you. Um, so when I say that, by the way, I don't mean like it is okay to be unreasonable. It's okay to
Like a
be like,
bully.
no, it's absolutely not okay to be a bully. But like sometimes you're in a situation where you know what the person wants to hear is a certain answer,
Right.
but it is bad for you to give
Yeah.
them that answer, and it is your responsibility to tell them the truth. And short term, they might be a bit grumpy, um, but long term, that person now doesn't have any reason to doubt anything you say to them going forward, right? Like you've built
Mm.
like that trust where it's like, okay, I'm not going to second guess Josh because he told me this thing I really didn't want to hear, but I know he's going to be he's a straight shooter. So that's important. And when I say tell the truth, I don't necessarily I'm not accusing anyone of like lying, but people do that thing where they sugarcoat, they embellish,
Yeah.
there's that want it's a social peer pressure thing of like I want to cushion this so that you don't feel bad. But sometimes like conflict managing conflict is a part of relationships, right? And if you
Mhm.
hide things or even just obscure things, like you are long term causing damage that it may feel better in the short term, right? So
Yeah.
that's important. Um, a soft skill that absolutely comes from acting. Um, Being able to talk in a way that doesn't set people to sleep, like you know this, Emily. Like a large part of acting is like you're taking people on a journey, and you're conveying information in a way, like even the way I'm
Yeah. It's
talking
good
right now.
storytelling.
Yeah, it's like the thing where you're like that irregular pace of talk, like that the tone that I'm projecting right now, all of that stuff. These are just like subconscious things that I'm doing without even thinking about it that makes me interesting to listen to, that draws people in, right? And
Mhm.
anyone that has any kind of acting experience is able to do that, right? Um, but you would be shocked how many people just cannot do it. And in unfortunately you find developers who are very, very talented, very good at what they do, right? Extremely talented developers who cannot sell their game whatsoever, because they completely, I don't want to say they completely lack charisma, but they just don't have
They
they
find it
don't have
hard.
that like energy, right? Where they can
Yeah.
present. Whereas so I wouldn't put those developers in front of the people that I work with, because I know
Mm.
that the moment I do that, like the game's dead. But I know there's something there. So I will take on the role of the developer
Yeah.
and go, right, I am pitching this game to you folks. Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you have to be able to sell yourself and sell your skill set. Or if you can't do that, partner yourself with somebody who can, like
Mhm.
find that person who has that voice that can but that recognizes your skill set and your talent, but has that voice to kind of push the team forward. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's not just a games industry thing. That's just having a job, full stop, right? Um, so there, yeah.
Nice. So finally, what advice do you have for anyone looking to enter the industry?
I think I'm proof positive that like networking works, talking to people works, going to events works. Um, if you're wanting to join the industry, find out what your local events are. Um, there are things like in the north of England, there are things like Gameo, um, Games Industry Biz run a bunch of events. BAFTA, more so in London, I'll be honest, but BAFTA do run a lot of events as well. Um, Go to them, sign up, go. And don't make the mistake that everyone makes when they first start networking of like approaching a group of people and just immediately putting your business card in front of them. Just talk to people, just be a human being. Like talk to people. If things that you're passionate about come up in conversation, talk about it. Like show your passion, demonstrate your make friends. Like that is what essentially networking is. Like it's
Hmm.
making friends with people. And then when you feel comfortable and you start like your kind of network gets to a point where you can go to an event and you just know people, there's someone in the room that you can approach, then you can start like putting your card in front of people, then you can start like searching for jobs, asking after jobs and things like that. You will have a far better chance of landing a gig that way than simply scrolling through LinkedIn and applying to things. Like people, it may be unreasonable, it may be unfair, but people are more likely to hire a familiar face. Like that's
Hmm.
just the way of things. So that's the advice I would give you. Go out there and talk to people.
Amazing. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been really helpful.
No worries. Thank you for having me.